and we must do it. If we don't control insiders, this will be over and over. To lead by an any big fat love, find common ground to halt the spread of lies, and we must do it big fat love.
All right, everybody. Hello and welcome to Fireside Chat number 69, Steps to Protect Male Students, with our guest, Jonathan Taylor. Hello, Jonathan. Welcome to the call.
Hi, can you hear me okay still?
Yes, we can hear you okay still.
Okay, good. Yeah, I thought I had some headphone difficulty for just a minute there, but looks like it's still charging okay.
You're a little staticky. Are you are we losing the I don't know what's going on. Are we losing the like your audio? Is something happening with it?
No, I mean it should be fine. I almost wonder if let's see. Does it sound really bad?
No, it sounds good now. It sounds
okay.
Good.
Okay.
All right. We are good. So he is the founder and admin of Title IX for All, an information clearinghouse and utility website that advocates for the rights of men and boys in education. You may also remember him, if you've been watching us for a while, from an older website called A Voice for Men and A Voice for Male Students. Somehow it just like I brain farted and it was gone. A Voice for Male Students was it's a great YouTube channel. Actually, you could still find Jonathan Taylor's content on YouTube, various interviews and stuff. I actually just listened to one before the show today where you were talking to a woman at NPR about a bunch of stuff going on. I don't know if you remember that, but that was from like a couple
that was like a
years ago.
40-minute interview.
Yeah, it was like 45 minutes long. Yeah. So, welcome to the call. Thank you for taking time to join us.
Yeah,
on this,
thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
glad to be here.
Oh no, this is great. What we want to talk about is the recent news regarding the Dear Colleague letter and Title IX. So last week I had Ash Gao. She was the reporter at the Real Clear Investigations, The Observer, and The Federalist. And she had lots to bring to the table. But I want to talk to Jonathan Taylor as well, because you've been involved in this probably a little longer than her. So actually, first thing I should ask is, how long have you been advocating for boys in education? And what got you interested in doing that?
Well, I would say it's been since the fall, well, really the spring of 2011. And I really got interested in it when I was an instructor at Texas A&M. And I had to read, initially I didn't really have any concept of what gender advocacy was, let alone gender advocacy in education. So I first encountered gender ideologies on an academic level, and I was introduced to the conversation in a lot of feminist academic publications, and I noticed that some of the publications that we were required to read were a little too eager to stereotype men, especially in a negative way. And in addition to that, I thought that the actual academic rigor was a little bit lacking. So I didn't feel bad as a man at first. I felt more, I took more exception to it on an academic level. But then as I began to look more and more into it, I discovered that there really was a lopsided conversation on gender equity in education that had been going on for the last 40 years. And it just never really corrected itself. And it wasn't going to correct itself on its own. And so then I just started cataloging everything I could see and that I could find. And then I learned how to make a website and started putting it on the website. And here we are today. Short story, but that's it.
All right. No, that's suitable. I mean, that sounds like you just sort of started to observe, something was off, and then you saw patterns, and then you started to put it all together, and you thought maybe I should archive or record this stuff because something fishy going on.
Yeah, and there's definitely other stuff too. Like you could see that academia was beginning to, like in my experience, I could see that, I was studying to be professor of English. And I could see how a lot of people were already starting to get this groupthink mentality, even in graduate school, where
Hello?
picking up on this.
Okay. There you go.
Oh, can you hear me still?
Yeah, you dropped
Okay.
for a second. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I began to, as I was introduced to this stuff in academia, a lot of my colleagues were starting to adapt or adopt some of the, I would say, more problematic attitudes toward men and boys, and that greatly disturbed me, and that just added more and more of an impetus, of an encouragement to keep on doing it. And of course, there's, once you find out the extent of what's going on, you're like, oh my God, and you can't really turn a blind eye to it anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. For those who are watching, I know that we're streaming to multiple platforms, and I noticed that some people in chat are talking about there are issues where the video is constantly buffering. If a refresh doesn't work, one thing that I find that does work is basically try clicking back on the video about 20 seconds or so, and then usually, you give it enough little room to load. I don't know what the issue is. On our end, it shows me the stream health is good, so it's not something that's happening on my end. Must be something going on with YouTube itself, but I can't really tell you. Or you can try, you can also try Facebook, or you can try Twitch, see if it's working better there. So, all right. Well, anyway, so back on this. So Title IX. Let's talk a little bit about that and the Dear Colleague letter. What are your thoughts on what Betsy DeVos, what she wants to do, what she's accomplished so far? Have you been looking very closely at it? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, concerning the Dear Colleague letter specifically, and concerning the rulemaking process that she wants to go into about future guidance on sexual misconduct in academia, I like the direction in which she's headed. I don't think that she'll get us quite where we need to be. I mean, I don't think there's any perfect area where she will get us anytime soon, but I do think that she is taking us in the right direction. There's some things that I do disagree with her on, and there's some things that I do very much agree with her on, but I think that she is at least starting to create this dialogue where the rights of the accused are just as important as the rights of accusers, and that's something that's been very much missing from the dialogue so far, and we can see that reflected in the new guidance that was issued just recently, and so. I mean, I cannot say that I would support her in everything, but I support the general direction in which she's headed so far.
Okay. What are some of the areas that you disagree with her on, if you don't mind?
Yeah, no problem. So, so in particular, if you look at the Department of Education under Betsy DeVos recently issued two new letters. They're both binding on all post-secondary institutions receiving federal funding under Title IX. One of them was the letter rescinding the 2011 Dear Colleague letter, and the other one was an interim guidance in the form of a Q&A, and that Q&A document was binding guidance for schools investigating and adjudicating sexual misconduct until until the Department of Education finishes the new rulemaking and public comment and review period. Now, in that Q&A, there are still some provisions that I think can violate the rights of the accused that I don't agree with, such as there's a section where it says if the school chooses to allow appeals from its decisions. In other words, if the school believes that a male student is guilty and finds him guilty, they will allow, or if the accuser does not get the outcome that she wants, the school will still allow the accuser to appeal the findings of the hearing. So this is very similar to a double jeopardy case in like a criminal court. You can't just have a new trial all over again because you don't like the outcome. But here, this is still provided in the Q&A. So what DeVos did kind of get back to is that really appeals are not so much for the accuser; they're really more for the accused, and that's the case with just about every every form of law. If you're criminally convicted, you appeal it. You don't just if you're acquitted, the accuser in a criminal case doesn't just appeal and try it again. But that's
hello.
That's something I disagree with.
Okay. Oh no, you
hear me
dropped.
still?
Yeah, you dropped again, but you're back.
Oh, okay.
So go ahead.
I guess it's just dropping for a second or two.
It just did like right at the end of your response to my question. So
okay,
and that's good. Okay. So that's
just go ahead.
That's just one of the things.
Yeah,
is that
one
like
of the things?
That seems like a big one, though. Kind of.
It is a big one. Yeah. And another case, another thing is that so when the Education revoked the 2011 Dear Colleague letter, it revoked the mandate from the previous administration that schools must use the preponderance of
Wait, I'm sorry.
adjudicating.
I dropped you at. I lost you at preponderance. I know you're going to say the preponderance of evidence standard. I suppose.
So it revoked the mandate from the previous administration's guidance letter that schools must adjudicate via the preponderance of evidence standard. Mm-hmm. However, what it did not do is say that the preponderance of evidence standard should not be used. Instead, in the interim guidance letter, what it says is that the preponderance standard or a clear and convincing standard can be used. It just depends on the type of standard the school already uses for adjudicating other accusations. So the new mandate, at least for the interim, is that schools must simply be consistent with whatever type of evidence standard they use for other accusations. So, for example, if for other accusations the school uses the clear and convincing standard, a higher standard, they would then be required to be consistent and use that same standard for sexual misconduct accusations. If, however, they use the lower preponderance of evidence standard, they are also required to be consistent. Use that same low standard of evidence in adjudicating sexual.
Yes. Hello.
Hey. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's just dropping for like 1 or 2 seconds. I don't know why.
That's all right. It's all right. It was that you were saying I lost you right at preponderance of evidence standard for adjudicating, and then you dropped right there.
Yeah. I almost wonder if I should get on my phone because these headphones. I mean, they're supposedly really awesome headphones, but I don't know what's going on.
You're having some issues. If you want to, I guess we could swap, and I can talk to the chat for a little bit, and you can come back, and we could see if that works.
I mean, I could. Let's see. Can you?
What was that? Hello? Hello? You dropped again. It sounds like your headphones are underwater. What was that? Hello? I lost you. Do your things run on batteries? Uh-oh. We're losing them. Guys, I'm sorry. We're having technical issues on Jonathan's got problems with his headset. Are you there? I can't hear you at all. Hello?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, barely. What's up?
Yeah, I'm gonna try.
Okay. Just get on your phone and come back. I'll talk to the chat for a little while. To feel free if you can hear me. Okay, so chat. He'll be back in a bit. I noticed that some of you guys move over to Twitch and found that Twitch was a lot more stable. So if you guys aren't on Twitch, just go to our Twitch channel. It should be twitch.tv twitch.tv/honeybadgerradio. Just go there, and that should probably be fine. I understand that that it's way more stable there. So, but So we'll just wait here for Jonathan to come back. Technically, it shows he's still online, but he's not, actually. He should be back soon. So, but he's sharing some interesting stuff about Title IX I didn't know. At least these changes that they're looking at. And yeah, it does sound like they haven't quite gotten it down. So let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. Joey Jojo says, hey Doge. Hey Joey. Neela Possess says, Brian, show your teeth. I can't do that right now. I'm married and I'm not allowed to show my teeth anymore. Leslie Maxwell says, the sound is steady here. Karl Marx, as Jordan Peterson says, live a life that is sufficiently meaningful to justify the buffering of existence. That sounds close to the quote. I'm not really sure. Excalibur Blade says, Brian, it's your show now. It's always been my show. I control the vertical. I control the horizontal. And your one ball wonder. Show your one ball wonder. He's sleeping. I'm not gonna. He needs his beauty sleep because see, now that my one ball does the work of two, he needs to rest more often. So usually when I start the shows, I put him in the closet like Small Wonder, that robot, Vicky or whatever her name was. All right, so somebody's here, I think. No, are you back? No. So I'm just waiting here. Sorry guys, you know how it is. Shit happens. But we will have him back shortly. And everything should be gravy. So maybe you guys can just ask me some questions. Oh, somebody's here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a bit echoey, but you are clearer.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm now using my laptop speaker instead of my headphone speaker. I apologize for that. But we should no longer have any issues with batteries because I'm plugged into the wall right now. So yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah. We got it. You sound good, and this will work. So okay. We were talking about preponderance of evidence standard versus the guilty innocent until proven guilty. I almost quoted what's actually going on right now: guilty until proven innocent. But so you were talking about some of the other things that you disagreed with regards to Betsy DeVos' proposal. Now it is in the review process right now, correct? They're looking at it. So. Do you think that some of these concerns that you have could be addressed at that stage? Or do you think it's actually harder to keep them from going the other way and essentially keeping as much of what the Dear Colleague letter put in terms of standards? There could be people working to essentially make that the standard. What are your concerns with that?
Well, there's just so much volatility in the current administration that it's really hard to predict where it's going to go. I mean, we do have a lot of people that are, resigning for one issue or another. I mean, I don't see any reason why DeVos would resign anytime soon, but I mean, you never know. So really, we're at a point where we can't really predict. I don't think anyone can really predict exactly where it's going to go or even close. But I do think that in general, I guess what I can predict is that we are moving in an overall better direction regarding like a balance between the rights of the accused and the rights of the accuser. So I can say that whether or not each of these provisions that need to be dropped will be dropped, I can't really say that. I do have kind of a gut feeling, though, that there's going to be some stuff that hangs on that just that needs to be gone, but we'll probably not get rid of in this administration. For example, I think the long game should be that schools just simply need to defer to the police and to the courts, the criminal justice system for these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. I think they need to assist, accusers. I think they need to make reasonable accommodations for the accuser and for the accused. But these schools are not sufficient experts on investigating or deciding matters of guilt or innocence in these types of things, and there's no way that they can ever be. So I think the biggest problem that I could see from a conceptual standpoint in trying to move forward is that there's such a focus on making the process equitable, the adjudication and investigation process, when really we just need to have a complete paradigm shift and move all this stuff over to the criminal justice system primarily.
And when you say equitable, you mean that they're trying to please everybody involved instead of just saying this is not the way, this is just the wrong way to do this. That the correct position on this issue is not the middle just because we want to please people. It's got to be, a principled choice that unfortunately some people are just going to be unhappy with. Is that
that's what it's got to be. Yeah, definitely, because and what I fear and what I think is may actually happen is that the attempt, the goal of the current administration to make everything equitable may entrench the investigation and adjudication process in academia, and that's what I think is bad for everyone involved. Really, like, if the entire reason why this stuff is being investigated by professors rather than police is because there are these myths that the criminal justice system, routinely, systemically fails, rape accusers, and certainly that's true in some cases. But I mean, we hear these things such as only 6% or whatever of
accusations are false.
Well, that too. But we hear some people say that only 6% or 2% or whatever of rapists will spend a day in jail, and that's just totally false. Really, what they're looking at is the conviction rate, when in reality, a lot of cases are plea bargained and people are sent to prison. So really, and when cases actually do get to actually be tried in a court of law, the conviction rate is roughly a little over 50%, I believe. So that's not really that bad. No. It's so many cases are plea bargained out, and otherwise they're dropped, and they don't count the amount of men who go to prison on a plea bargain in their figures when they talk about the number of men accused of rape who go to prison.
So when they make that stat, does that also include cases where men are found to be not guilty?
Yeah, definitely.
So basically, anytime a guy is not guilty, which even in cases where he legitimately isn't guilty, that counts as a guy that got away, even though he was never guilty to begin with.
Effectively, it does, because these people are fixed upon this dogma, and really a dogma is the best way of describing it, that only 2% of cases of accusations are false, when in reality they're just borrowing that statistic from the general rate of false accusations across all crimes, and there's so much evidence that does not apply to false accusations of rape specifically, that that number should not be trusted. And of course, there's been numerous studies showing why that number should not be trusted, and actually finding much higher rates of false reporting. So, but nonetheless, they cling to it. I mean, I just recently, actually before I got onto this show, I hopped on over to the website of Know Your 9, which is like Know Your Title 9. It's an advocacy website, but for the other side,
it's and it pro Title 9, pro Dear Colleague letter website, basically. Yeah,
or really more like far left, feminist, fundamentalist, kind of crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I'll go ahead and look that website up while you're telling me what else you found there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just looked at one of their statistics. There's a section where they have statistics, and I'm like, these statistics were so debunked a million times over. But I mean, it's kind of like the wage gap statistic. They just keep on coming back, and they're just over and over again. And it's of course the case where the truth doesn't matter. It's the narrative that matters, and unfortunately, that narrative has shaped a lot of education policy for the last 30 years. But of course Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I have a Know Your 9 on the website. I want to share some of the stuff on here, so we're looking at the other side of the argument, or at least this website's particular argument for the audience. It says, ask your university president to uphold Title IX guidance. On September 17, 2017, Betsy DeVos announced plans to roll back federal guidance on Title IX, while her comments demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of the law and perpetuate myths that harm survivors, your rights remain intact. No matter what Betsy DeVos says, Title IX and the Clery Act are still the law of the land. While the law is the law, there are actions you can take to preserve the existing federal guidance outlined in the 2011 Dear Colleague letter. So, what is the Clery Act for people who may be watching and don't know?
The Clery Act is just a law that mandates that universities need to report crimes statistics that happen, on university property. They and every time that they fail to report, actually for each accusation they fail to report, particularly for sexual misconduct, they can be fined by the Department of Education. And I think those fines are somewhere in the neighborhood of $24,000 for each charge that they fail to include, that they fail to publicly post. And of course, they have deadlines by which they need to have this submitted to the Federal Department of Education and posted publicly for students for the incoming academic year. And yeah, so it's basically just a reporting crime statistics reporting requirement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then when I look at there's a little page here that says why schools handle sexual violence reports. So this is unique. Do schools handle all crime that might happen, like if someone is mugged or if there's a fight or someone's house is robbed or dorm or whatever, or is it only usually just the sexual assault stuff?
It's really just that. I mean, there are some other cases where schools can enforce their code of conduct and things like that, but in a lot of cases, when it comes to the more serious crimes, like for example a homicide investigation, they're not going to have their own internal homicide investigation team. It's not going to be like that at all. They're going to defer to the police and to the criminal justice system. They're not going to pretend for a second that they know how to investigate something of that magnitude independent of the police and the criminal justice system. It's just it would just boggle the mind. I would think that anyone would even try that, but that's exactly what they do with these types of what would otherwise be a felony accusation. Mm-hmm. So
okay, I'm going to read a little bit of this section too, just for fun. So, in response to coverage of university mistreatment of sexual assault survivors, many observers have wondered why schools handle these crimes at all. Why not just leave it to the police? Here's the answer in a couple of easy bullet points. Why do schools handle sexual violence reports? Title IX requires schools to combat sex discrimination in education. One of the most common objections we hear to campus adjudication is, but isn't rape a crime? It absolutely is, and students who report to their schools can also report to the police. However, rape and other forms of gender-based violence manifest and perpetuate inequality, and federal anti-discrimination law recognizes that. To make sure that all students, regardless of their gender, identity, and expression, have equal access to education, schools are required to prevent and respond to reports of sexual violence. This isn't a replacement for reporting to the police. It's a parallel option for survivors based in civil rights rather than criminal law. So,
but there's so much that they don't say there. So, yes. And a lot of assumptions that are embedded in that. For one thing, if you've been following the conversation, the public conversation about why people try to justify these things, a lot of the time people will say, well, but men get raped too. There are a lot of men who are sexually assaulted as well as women. Well, then that does indeed beg the question, if men are sexually assaulted as well as women who are sexually assaulted, doesn't that mean that sexual assault isn't something that is limited to only one sex?
Then how does that perpetuate inequality? Like, I think that's a bit of a stretch just right off the bat, because Title IX, I don't see, like, I've always found it confusing how Title IX manages to somehow be related to sexual assault on college campuses.
Well, that's right where it says that perpetuates right where it says rape perpetuates inequality. That's actually a page right out of radical feminist Susan Brown Miller's 1978 book Against Our Will, where she says that rape is a political crime by which all men keep all women in a constant state of fear. So it's if you're viewing it through the fundamentalist feminist lens, you really have to view it in a sense of that feminists view it as a political crime. It's essentially an act of terrorism. And so in that sense, that is how they view it. It's really like a kind of dogma. And that's, I mean, you can go back and read the fundamental texts on this, and that many other feminist academics have cited, a million times over in their little, echo chamber. But that's how they view it. But it's interesting that although sexual assault is not something that is limited to only one sex being the victim, there is something that is overwhelmingly limited to just one sex being the victim, and that is false accusations of sexual assault. Roughly 99.9 repeating % of those who are wrongly accused of sexual assault are men, and that's just the reality. And if anything, and you know what, that may be the area where we need to take it. Instead of trying to say that sexual assault is not a form of sex discrimination per se, maybe the right thing to do is to fight fire with fire and say that false accusations are a form of sex discrimination, and to say that those people deserve Title IX protections as well. And isn't it quite obvious that when people are wrongly accused of committing sexual assault, that it does create a hostile environment? I mean, let's go back to what happened in, the 2006 Duke lacrosse, the infamous 2006 Duke lacrosse false rape accusation case, where 88 faculty representing 10 different programs, 10 different departments and 5 different academic programs actually signed a statement in the university newspaper that openly presumed the guilt of the 3 young men who were accused. There were wanted posters all around campus. People carried around banners that said "castrate," and things like that.
Yeah.
That's a hostile. That's an incredibly hostile environment. And if anyone treated the accusers in that fashion, people would be appalled at the barbarity of it. But in modern academia, that stuff just kind of, flush it down the memory hole. We're just going to forget about that. And that's all as a result of the lopsided conversation over the past 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
So really, in what Know Your Nine is saying, there's a lot of assumptions in there, and there's a lot of dogma, but also notice that they're kind of making an appeal to authority. They're basically saying like, the law says. Well, number one, the law does not say. It's really the guidance that presumes to interpret the law. They're saying that Title IX requires schools to combat sex discrimination.
Sure.
But there's a question of whether or not Title IX actually requires schools to combat rape specifically, and the elision of the two is kind of a sleight of hand that does deserve some pointing out and some delving into. So
it's almost like because the ability to choose between the colleges or the actual police, it's almost like choosing between the parents and choosing the one that that's going to be more lenient. And then the website tells you, this one does anyway, that if you go to the college administration, they're going to believe you and they're going to act on your accusation. They're not actually going to go through the due process, because it says then the next section, it says, why is this good for survivors? And it says, for many survivors, campus reporting is their only option. So they're already sort of setting that up to say, well, you should just go to your college administrator. It says many victims of sexual violence don't want to turn to the criminal justice system. They fear skepticism and abuse from police, prosecutors, or juries. They may not want to go through that ordeal of a long trial. They may fear retaliation from their assailant, who will most likely not end up prosecuted, let alone convicted, and they may be hesitant to send their assailants to prison.
And absolutely none of that is a justification for creating some kind of replacement, which is really what it is, not a parallel avenue of redress, but a replacement of the criminal justice system. I mean, yeah, you could say that about all types of victims of a crime. Someone who is a victim of, being, violently assaulted, they're also afraid that their version of events will be questioned. I mean, yes, obviously sexual assault is a crime of a deeply intimate nature, but the fear that an accuser should have and the feelings of an accuser should not be a justification to just throw away the due process rights of the people who are accused. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the Betsy DeVos thing and the Dear Colleague letter.
Sure.
Let me see what I have here. So some of the little facts about it. So I was talking to Ash, and I asked her, maybe you know this too, but I thought I would bring it up. I asked her, should there be a concern that even if, like, let's say Betsy DeVos gets everything done that she wants to do with regards to this, like all the goals she wants to accomplish, even if it's insufficient, even if she doesn't quite do everything that, you know, we think would be best, would be essentially to just leave it to the cops, you know, the way that every other crime is handled. But let's say she gets it all done regardless. What are the odds that in 4 years or 8 years, which is starting to look like 8 years, when the next president comes in and the next administration comes, that they don't just reverse all of that?
Yeah, I mean, and that's what it's just like living in a highly partisan, bipartisan, politicized system.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like we're on a seesaw where, we go up on one side for 8 years and then we come down and the other side goes up for 8 years. So yeah, there's a very real possibility that it could be undone and even made worse over the next, I mean, it's when people say, oh, it can't get worse. So trust me, it can always get worse. But I don't like to be so doomsday about it. But I do think we owe it to ourselves to be real and say that, look, this is not the end, not by a long shot. And the only way, really, I mean, I view these policies are really just symptoms of our culture.
Absolutely.
And really, it's the culture that has to change. Not just the letter of the law,
right?
And our culture has to change to be a culture where we say that men and women and boys and girls are valued equally. But unfortunately, we don't have that kind of culture right now. We have the culture that says, well, women should be treated just the same as men, unless, of course, there's a situation which could benefit women over men, in which case it's justified because of, and then insert the narrative of woeful oppressions that happened 50, 100, 10,000 years ago, and so forth. And of course, any kind of real advocacy of egalitarianism or equality is routinely brushed aside as misogyny or whatnot. And unfortunately, that is the society in which we live. And until people are afraid to hate men, until we live in a society like that, it's going to be uncertain what the leading institutions of our society decide to do. You decide to write on a sheet of paper, for policy, 8 years from now, it's 16 years from now, et cetera. So
right,
yeah,
I agree with the culture thing. Obviously, our culture influences our politics. That happens after. So, but Ash was actually a bit more optimistic. She said that when Obama put together the Dear Colleague letter, it was more like an executive order. So it didn't go through the normal process, that like the legal process and the judging period that what Betsy DeVos is proposing will. So Ash says that if it goes through, and it's got to go through the review period, so it's going to take some time, but if it goes through that way, I guess it potentially could set legal precedent. And if it does, then it'd be much more difficult to undo.
I agree there.
That way.
I agree there. And that's one of the things that really undermined the legitimacy of the previous administration's 2011 Dear Colleague letter, is that it was basically decided behind closed doors without the public's knowledge, and then just rammed down all of a sudden one day just rammed down the throats of, post-secondary education institutions across the United States. Just all of a sudden, there was no period of public comment and review. If you look at the way that the Department of Education does things with, has periods of public comment and review for other policies, or even that other departments, like look at the Department of Labor. I know that people don't really follow what the other departments are doing, but there are investment guidelines that the Department of Labor has been reviewing for years. They had a public period of public comment and review for years, and they just got around to issuing like their final guidance or whatever in June of this year. It's regarding, for those of you who are interested in investments, the what's called a uniform fiduciary standard. But that took years of public comment and review, and that establishes more of the legitimacy of it. I would definitely agree. But the Department of Education, with the previous guidance, as we said, did not do this at all. And to me, that just destroys entirely the legitimacy of it. I don't think that, and of course, those who support the previous administration's Dear Colleague letter don't look at it that way. I think many of them have double standards in that regard. Even though Betsy DeVos is going through a much more rigorous standard of establishing, guidance and policy than the previous administration, she's still going to get, shit on, and treated as illegitimate.
Oh, of course.
And of course, to a certain degree, I mean, there's a lot of partisan belligerence going on. So like there's a lot of people who really, really love Trump and people who really, really hate Trump. And so anyone who's even remotely associated with Trump is going to be just absolutely demonized by people who already are belligerent to begin with.
And simultaneously worshipped. So it's like
exactly.
It's
and that's not to say that, I'm not making a character statement about Trump necessarily. I mean, I think he's got some good things and bad things and et cetera, but we can spend forever on that and get sidetracked. But
sure.
But really, I think if you're being honest, you have to look at what DeVos is doing in its own light and look at it in the context not of Trump, but of the way education policy and particularly policy on gender equity in education has been going for the last half century. And
just look at what she's doing. Don't worry about who she is. Just look at the action and see if it's something that do you like it? Do you not like it? If you don't like it, what would you change about it? Try to look at it from multiple angles, seek out the truth, ask questions about what's happening. And that's it. Don't, forget about all the other stuff about, character and personality. That's all background noise. It doesn't really help. Just look at what's actually happening.
Now, I would like to kind of balance out what I said about DeVos's interim guidance, because I only really listed the things that I disagree with for the most part, but there are some really good things in it. For example, first of all, schools do actually have the option now of using a higher standard of evidence, the clear and convincing standard in particular. Another thing is that schools are now required to notify students ahead of the any kind of hearing of the actual charges against them, and they're supposed to do it in a timely manner. Another thing that's different is that the previous administration recommended a 60-day time frame for having these kinds of investigations and the findings of their investigation completely wrapped up. Whereas this investigation says that there's not going to be any one specific time frame that's mandated. Really, it just has to be considered. The reasonableness of the time frame will be considered in light of the particular that particular case. So that's good as well. Another thing is that sometimes students were allowed to have advisors during a hearing with administrators when they were accused, and some schools would only allow students who were accused to have an advisor from a pre-approved list of advisors, and sometimes those advisors had clear conflicts of interest and biases that would have precluded them from being any kind of assistance during the hearing. But the new guidance strikes that down and says that schools should not have any kind of restrictions regarding which advisor may participate. So that's good. It also says that stereotypes, sex stereotypes in general, both male and female, should be avoided. Like there's some schools that where if a man and a woman are both drunk and they have sex, a school, there's been some Title IX investigators who will say that they just presume that the male is guilty because
of course.
the male is the de facto initiator. Why? Well, because he's male. That's why.
Because men have more agency than women, and that's why.
So there are some definite good things coming out of the new guidance, and but obviously there's still a long way to go, and I do have to agree with Ash that there is definite reason to be to be optimistic. I would, but I always advocate being cautiously optimistic. Never blind yourself to to what's going on out of idealism. We definitely still have a long way to go. So.
Okay, and well, I was just having a thought, and this is something that actually has come up often when we talk about rape allegations on college campuses, which happen a lot. I do a weekly show, the Polecat Cast, and it seems like every week I either get a story about a guy who was falsely accused of sexual assault, and the colleges are the ones that essentially handled the case, or I'm talking about some guy who was brutally beaten or came close to death or had been dismembered in some way in like a domestic violence case. It's always something like that, or some guy who got totally boned in like family courts. So when the stuff with college campus rape allegations happen, one of the things that I notice comes up a lot is people have brought up, and I wonder about this myself, while feminist advocates like Know Your Nine would say the reason why you should go to college campuses is because the police are not going to help you, and they're going to be, they're going to ask you uncomfortable questions, and they're going to want to know all your intimate details, and it might make you uncomfortable, and the college would just believe you unequivocally without question, and they'll handle it, and they'll be fast, and they'll be quiet, and then you don't have to worry about all the embarrassment. Sometimes I wonder, do colleges, are they complicit in doing this partly because, and this is something that people mention a lot in our comment section, because they're also interested in their image as a university. And so they, if there's a rape that happens, they want to cover it up. They want to handle it internally, and they don't want the media getting involved. They don't want the press involved because it could affect their, people going to their college in the future. It could like give them a bad name or something like that. Do you think that that plays a role potentially, like the way that they act on the administrative level?
I'd say it plays the biggest role. One thing that, there's a statement I came across a while ago. It's that careerism trumps everything in academia, and it's so the case. Schools, a Title IX coordinator and Title IX investigators, these people are not real. A lot of these people are some of them are feminist zealots who are veering off into the extreme. That much is very much true, but the core of the Title IX position is a risk management position, and it's a CYA position. They're concerned about their careers and their image first and foremost. And there's a statement which I like to say, and I think it's very relevant. The faces of the victims may change from age to age, but a lot of the time the reason is still the same. And that there is a definite case that in some cases, in decades past, schools have perhaps discouraged accusers from bringing their accusations to police. Or trying to seek avenues of redress, but now that the pendulum swings the other way, they're concerned about their image, because back then they were concerned about the image of there being a rape on campus or whatnot, but now they're concerned about not doing something and having their name in the news with a Department of Education investigation, or at least that was mainly the case with the last administration. And now they're just, on a witch hunt against, young men who are accused. So it's like they're always going to serve themselves first and foremost. Never underestimate the careerism and self-serving nature of these institutions and these administrations. Now a lot of them do care. I don't want to paint them as entirely heartless. But when it really gets down to it, if it came down to them losing their jobs or them having to make a questionable decision that borders on morally wrong, a lot of them, I am confident to say, will keep their jobs. They would rather choose to keep their jobs. And that's just the way they are. That's just that's just something you have to go in with your eyes wide open and accept. So there's a bigger, there's another war out there, and that's between the the status quo. Administrators really are the embodiment of the status quo when you think about it. And so they're just there to enforce the policies that are on the books, and they have the power to do it. And And then there's no whole another issue in academia regarding administrative bloat. For example, the administrators really have become a class in and of themselves. So back 30 years ago, the proportion of teachers to administrators was vastly different than it is now. Now on many college campuses, you have more administrators than you actually have teachers, which is kind of crazy, depending on how you define administrator. But
that is crazy. Dude, I guess they teach as well, but they also run things. So
yeah,
this is it's another case of follow the money in a way, I guess, or at least follow the secure tenured professor list.
Risk management is a really big business in academia, and Title IX administrators are one of the pieces in risk management. So don't forget that these people are big on their own careers, and they are careerists first and foremost. Definitely.
All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot. Are there any things that you wanted to say specifically about Title IX, dear colleague, or Betsy DeVos, before we take us out?
Well, I guess what I would say is that...
there was something. Actually, there was something really important. I wanted to ask you, so we know that this stuff is still a work in progress, and we also know that that there's still, it's still got some time before it's settled, and while some of the stuff looks promising, not all the issues will be fixed. So this is not something that boys and men that are going to school should necessarily breathe an enormous sigh of relief over. So I guess what I wanted to ask you about was specifically, and this is actually kind of like the reason why we did this, Fireside Chat, how men and boys can protect themselves on college campuses, like what they should be aware of in terms of Title IX, and how they can sort of, protect themselves.
Well, first and foremost, I would stay away from any kind of drunken hookups with a woman that you don't know, because those situations are where there is just a very high chance of both parties regretting the encounter from the previous night. The only difference is that if a man regrets sleeping, getting drunk and sleeping with a fat woman, and all his buddies finding out about it, he's not going to accuse her of rape. Whereas if a woman gets shamed by the other women in her sorority for sleeping with some loser guy, she does have recourse, and she does have a way to protect her image. So, and it's just the case that drunken hookups are one of where the highest chance of these accusations that will eventually lead to an accusation. So avoid drunken hookups. That's one thing I would say. And a lot of this is preventative. Some of this stuff, like my granddad would always say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So a lot of this you really have to prevent. You really choose your partners carefully. You really have to. But if you do get accused, I would immediately, cut off all social media, document everything, insist on receiving things in writing. If administrators tell you something verbally, just say, hey, I would like that in writing. Thank you very much. Make sure and tell your parents. Don't run around telling everyone. Try and find a good attorney. I have resources on my website to help with that.
Okay.
And
if you're dating a girl from another school, and can she still use the university, either yours or hers, against you?
Such cases have happened. They're rare, but they have happened. Yes.
So they can do that. So what do they do? Does the girl use, if a girl accuses a man of rape and he went to a different college, does she use the college the man went to as a means to get this handled, or does she use her college?
Based on what I've seen, yes. And that's another thing about this, that unfortunately both Dear Colleague letters do contain these provisions, is that if a school knows that a sexual assault happened on campus grounds or at a campus event, that school, if it knows or if it reasonably should have known, then it is required to investigate and decide if it needs to move further with some kind of finding, or adjudication. So yeah, that is very possible.
Wow.
And so yeah, I mean, and those cases are not common. Based on my database of 185 lawsuits, and also another 10 lawsuits that I've evaluated but have not yet added to the database. But they're certainly within the realm of possibility. So really, I mean, you have to be careful.
Yeah.
And this is one of those cases where, I'm not a religious guy myself, but I do think that there is some value in moving towards being a little more conservative in sexual values. Like, don't sleep around with a bunch of people that you don't know, that you don't trust very well. Choose your partners very carefully, not just for the fact that you may get a disease or you may get into some kind of psychological mess, but you could get into some real legal trouble that can destroy your life and your career and your reputation.
Yeah,
so
the more partners you get involved with, the more you increase your risk, not only of things like STDs, but also of, specifically in colleges, you could just hook up with some crazy chick and she could ruin your life. And she would have the power of the entire university at her, at her back. So
yeah.
And not only that, but if the accusation happens and, you get, even if they don't have enough conclusive evidence to convict you criminally, if they just kick you out because the university doesn't want to be affiliated with you because it makes them look bad, then everyone who goes to the university and all the people in your community assume that you must have done it, otherwise they wouldn't have kicked you out. And so you have way more problems than that. So,
and even if you're not expelled, even if you're just suspended, if you're there on a scholarship, if you're there on a scholarship and you need to maintain that scholarship in order to stay in, and demonstrate, academic progress, a certain level of academic progress while you're in order to maintain your scholarships for the next semester and so forth, you could lose your scholarships, and you can, you can come out legally ahead. I mean, you can come out legally on the right side of everything, but that doesn't mean you're going to get your scholarship back. That doesn't mean that you're going to get your academic career back on track. So just remember to be very, very careful out there. And, don't run around thinking that every woman is going to be like that, or even that most women would be like that. But just choose your partners very carefully.
Right.
Because you owe it to yourself to protect yourself.
I got a question from the chat. Somebody asked, if you get expelled from a college due to a Title IX false rape accusation, or rape accusation, whatever, will you still be able to attend another school, or is it kind of like a ban from school, period? Or is that going to affect your odds of finding another school?
It'll affect your odds. It's not an academic death penalty, although some people have been trying to push to make it like that. But it can indeed affect your odds of going to another school. Now there is a lot of what am I trying to say? The process of other schools sharing disciplinary information is not a perfect system. So the process of schools sharing academic records is much more set in stone and refined, but not so much the case with disciplinary records. But I still wouldn't rely on that as I would bet in any case that it's going to have an adverse effect on seeking another type of school. So
all right.
Yeah. All right. Oh, and I guess you were looking for other things that I wanted to say. I just wanted to apologize to the listeners and to you for that bit of technical difficulty that I had earlier. I know it must be a nightmare for the person hosting.
Oh, no, it's fine. We always have some kind of technical difficulty, so it just rolls off my back at this point. But okay. we dealt with it pretty quickly. It was cool. Thank you a lot for joining us, and for the guys who are watching. So just remember, if you're going to college and you're looking for that special someone, try to find yourself a Prim Reaper, a Karen, an Allison, or an Aiden Paladin or something, and just stay with her, because it's dangerous out there. So be sure to use that as your measuring stick in terms of who you want to be with.
Use the right measuring stick.
yeah, use the right measuring stick. So the website is Title IX for All. I have put it up on the screen here, and I've also included a link to the Facebook page by the same name. And this is Jonathan Taylor. So thank you, Jonathan, for joining us. Those of you guys who are watching, please feel free to light up that like button and also comment in the comment section. Discuss. And if you haven't already, subscribe everywhere. Specifically, I think I'd like you guys to go to Twitch and subscribe there because the stream seems to be the most stable on Twitch. And if we don't need YouTube, that's okay with us. So, I want to thank Jonathan again for taking the time to join us so late in the day. And I want to thank you guys for joining us on the Fireside Chat. We will see you on the next episode of Honey.